Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Are you guys part of the digital payment infrastructure revolution? That's the main question this morning. One of the reasons why we did this event at this majestic, I think some of you are part of the theater scene here in Ethiopia, is because, I don't know if some of you know, but this theater was built in 1955. It was built in 1955. It really represents the history of Ethiopia. As you know, Ethiopia, we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot again in the last 2 years, but really the last 70 years we've been through almost three different types of regimes. And this is a place that has seen all of these things pass through. Having said that, this is a place also where the people come almost every day to pay for a ticket, to see what Ethiopia's culture has to offer, right? So this is really a place for the people. It's a historic place, majestic place, it's an old place. And for us, the symbolism here, and I'm pretty sure when you came here, you've seen all of the different artists, singers, and all alike who've been here before us. Some of them have passed away. But we really wanted to do a modern thing here in this historic place, because we believe this is the time for Ethiopia to really transform, to really bring about a revolution. We have a banking sector here in Ethiopia that's still in its infancy. We have about 30 banks. Over the summer we had about 6 banks that formed in just the span of 2 months. But the banking sector is still very, very small. We have an economy that's growing really fast and a banking sector that's very small. So we need to do something. We're saying that Ethiopia is really on an economic transformation, digital transformation, but do we have all the ingredients is the main question. During the preparation for this event, and we have a culture at Arifpay at really having heated debates, because it's through heated debates that the best ideas come out, right? And we had a heated debate about the fact that one of the strategies or policies that we're following here as Arifpay in terms of enabling the Ethiopian economy is the homegrown economic reform, right? Some of you are familiar with the term Hager Bekel in Amharic, homegrown. So we thought it'd be nice also to use the term Hager Bekel or homegrown as part of the press release. And then we had a heated debate because we said, what really makes this device a homegrown solution or a homegrown device? Think of it, right? The first point of sale technology, I don't know if some of you know this, maybe this is a good question, but the first point of sale device was built for McDonald's in 1974. And I think it was maybe this big. And it wasn't even, there was no software whatsoever, right? So it's just a big piece of hardware. And you had to basically use through the analog mechanisms. You were able to issue either a receipt or somehow, understand what you were paying for. In the 1990s, this point of sale evolved into something new with the advent of Microsoft with their Windows XP, and basically software started becoming the main, added value on this piece of hardware, right? And slowly, this piece of device, right, went from something this big in the 1970s to 1990 something with software, and slowly the computing power became so powerful that basically the software took over the hardware, right? And basically the hardware became a commodity. So the heated debate at Arifpay ended with the fact that, look, this piece of hardware these days is a commodity. It's a commodity. Let's not forget this. The computing horsepower that you have here is really powerful. You can do 1 billion times what you were able to do in 1974 with this piece of device. So the hardware is not really what makes it a special. What makes this homegrown in Hagar Bakal is the software. And the software was built by people here in this room. And that's why we're really proud about the point of sale system at Arifpay, is because this was a system that was built in Ethiopia for Ethiopia. And I want to give a big round of applause when I say this first to all of our software engineers who built this day in, day out since 2017. So a big round of applause, please. So I don't know if some of you were paying attention during the video, or some of you maybe were on actually your mobile devices, because we're going to talk about the mobile devices in a second. But do you know that we have only 11,000 point of sale machines in Ethiopia? And these are numbers, we're not making things up, and these are numbers from the National Bank of Ethiopia. You can look it up. These are numbers that were issued actually by the governor of the National Bank of Ethiopia just about 3 months ago. So 11,000 point of sale machines in Ethiopia. So if you do the math, right, I'm pretty sure in Ethiopia now we're averaging about 130 million people. That's my guess, right? But in the last numbers we're at about 110 million people. You just do a simple division, right? You're at about 1 post machine for every 10,000 individual here in Ethiopia. Think of it, right? 1 post machine for every 10,000 individual. No wonder the digital economy is here, full throttle, but yet we're not seeing these transactions happening, right? Because the cards are not going anywhere. They don't know where to go, besides the ATMs that some of you, I think, have moved here maybe in the last 2 to 3 years. When I moved here about 3 years ago, I grew up here, of course, but when I moved here 3 years ago, the ATMs were barely working. I was actually having a fear of my life when every time I was using my ATM, because sometimes, you know, even back in the days in other countries, right, the ATM goes in, your ATM card goes into the ATM and never comes out. But slowly in the last 2 years, we've seen also a major improvement here in Ethiopia. Not just in terms of the access for ATMs, but also the fact that it's working. And the fact that now you can use an Awash debit card or Awash ATM card, as we call it here in Ethiopia, and I'll talk about user adoption in a second, on a commercial Bank of Ethiopia ATM. And guess who's doing this work behind the scenes? It's the National Ethiopian Switch, ET Switch. And I think we have a few members here today. So another big round of applause for the ET Switch organization. A for-profit company that in the last, I think, decade has seen also a major transformation, but most importantly, was behind really the backbone behind the transformation of the banking sector. So all of the back-end infrastructure that you take for granted maybe on an everyday basis, again, you have homegrown Ethiopian software engineers who were, you know, going to school here in Ethiopia, who got this soft skill, who built the software. And I say all of these things because we Ethiopians sometimes we look down on ourselves, and it's not good. We do have not just the soft skills, the hard skills to make all of these things happen, and ET Switch made that interoperability happen, right? But nowadays, again, if you look at the numbers, we're at about 11 million. I think the last numbers are at around maybe 14 or 16 million. But we used the number 11 million because we did a quick assumption that out of those maybe 14 or 16 million or so ATM cards that are out there in Ethiopia in the hands of the citizens, a good chunk of it, let's say 20%, is not being used or maybe forgotten in your drawer, right? In their drawers. So if you use the 11 million ATM card number, now instead of doing the division by the citizens or the individuals, you're looking at the rate of 1 post for every 1,000 ATM cards. So it's still mind-boggling. And it's still no wonder why the digital payment is still not here in Ethiopia. So then the question becomes, what do we do? Should we adopt overnight whatever we see on TV, whatever we see in China, whatever we see in Korea? Because usually on these kinds of topics, by the way, the West, as we call it, is definitely not a reference. In the US, all of these digital payments are barely working. The banking sector has only seen incremental type of innovation. They've never seen a major 4.0 type of revolution in the banking sector. So the West is definitely not a reference. But should we do things that Korea did with Samsung Pay, Tencent and Alibaba with WeChat and Alipay? Japan, I see some people here from Japan. Only recently, also was able to ensure that the adoption of some of these technologies of payment through mobile is really happening. It took, decades. And it took also $1 billion, I believe, from SoftBank to really inject cash into the ecosystem, to say to people, forget about the cash. It's really clean. It doesn't smell, like in Ethiopia. But you shouldn't use it, right? So it took about $1 billion for these folks to adopt it. And still, they're still not there, right? So should we this is a term that we use very often, and we say, we need to leapfrog. But can we really leapfrog with digital payment? So this is the question also that we've really paused ourselves at Arifpay. Because even though you're seeing these really drastic, very almost shameful numbers of 3 transactions per point of sale machine per month. So again, think of it. It's about 50,000 transactions per month on a post machine here in Ethiopia. So it's very, very little. So we need to change that. But again, the question is, do we leapfrog or what do we do, right? For us at Arifpay, really our adoption is not technology adoption. We don't want to push our technology on people because it doesn't make sense. If I start pushing my technology here at the entrance of the National Theater, maybe 1 out of 10 people will start using it, and then the next day they will forget about it. So the user adoption is not really going to catch on, right? So for us, our obsession is really user adoption rather than our technology. Today, Arifpay can really do what WeChat Pay is doing. We can do what Alipay is doing. The question is, do we want to do it? And our answer right now is no. Because we don't want to push users. We don't want to bully our users. We want to push them so that they adopt new technologies, best in class and standards, but we shouldn't bully them. Because number one, they shouldn't be bullied. Number two, people forget about it. So all the investment that we're making, and by the way, we're a startup, so even though we're a financial institution that's licensed and now commercialized, and this is what we're really celebrating today, we're celebrating the commercialization, and we're the first to have the commercialization permission from the National Bank of Ethiopia. Our budgets and our pockets are not as deep as across the street, Ethio Telecom, or folks coming from Kenya and across the sea. I think you know who I mean. So what are we doing today at Arifpay? So when you come out today, please don't crucify us if you don't find the app on the Google Play Store, or if you don't find it on the Apple Store. And by the way, we've made also the executive decision not to go with the Apple iOS so far, because guess who's using Apple today here in Ethiopia? 0.02% of the population. So again, in terms of user adoption, for us, remember, that's our obsession. So we just decided that's it. We're just going to do it on Android, and we're going to come to it in a second. So for us, the first step in this maturity model in terms of user adoption is number one, going back to that Hager Becker software that we believe can really, really do magic. Remember, this piece, the hardware itself is not the real magic, even though, right, I mean, there's microchips and all that kind of stuff. But the software is what's really going to transform, we believe, the transaction. Because remember, point of sale can also be seen as a point of service. It takes two to tango. Our former prime minister used to use this expression a lot. I kept it because I really like it. It takes two to tango. For payment for a transaction, it takes two to tango. You have a user, you have a merchant. So we need to have the user adoption strategy on the user side of the house, the person who's issuing the payment. But we need to have also a user adoption strategy on the receiving end. So for us, the idea is to make sure that this transaction is really happening in a very smooth way. We need to make sure that the merchant is going to find, their benefits in using our technology. But we need to make sure also, because usually we think of it as only the user, right? I mean, the payer. But we need to think of it also as the receiver. And so, for us, what we're really focusing on this Arifpay 1.0, and I hope that we're going to see each other again here in the next 6 or 8 months for our Arifpay 2.0, is the Arif Smart POS, and we didn't turn it on, we should have. So this is the Arifpay Smart POS, and I think some of you have a mobile device in your pocket. I have one as well. We're going to also use and make sure that these devices are going to have also a point of sale type of capability. So I was saying, don't crucify us if when you're coming out today from this National Theater, you don't find the app. Because for us, the idea right now is to make sure that in this user adoption maturity model, that all of those 11 million ATM cards are going to find a place where they can be used. Because right now, they're just orphans, right? And it's not like we love those plastic debit cards. I actually really think that it's something of the past. But we need to make use of them. Same thing. There's a lot of Forex that goes into these things. A lot of Forex also goes into the plastic cards, right? And for our mobile devices, we're going to use, devices like this. This one, as you can see, is also branded. But to be honest, the first time I used one of these was in California when I was taking flying lessons. The old man who was giving me flying lessons was really one of the first early adopters, and it always stayed in my mind because the gentleman was somewhat of a senior citizen, and but he was one of the first to adopt what was at the time the Square Jack card reader. And I remember at the time when he was asking me to pay for his lesson through this kind of device, I always had a fear, right? So I was on the paying end, the fear that this thing may not work. And guess what? It did. And I was paying on and I put my signature with my hand, and somehow it worked. This was 10 years ago in the Silicon Valley. And somehow, the rest of the history with Square, right? So by the way, Arifpay, it's not like we want to be the Square of Ethiopia, but there's a lot of analogies with Square. And obviously, I still have this discomfort, so, and maybe some of you will have it as well. So this is a Jack-enabled device, but the idea and the reason why you see all of these devices here on the screen is because, again, in terms of user adoption, we will do what you ask us to do, right? So if you want a Jack-enabled device, we will do it. If you want a Bluetooth-enabled device, we will do it. If you want a smart POS with and I'm not a technical person, but a 6.0.x. whatever, we will do it. So it's up to you to tell us what you want as a merchant, as a user. And so for us, again, we will always focus on user adoption, right? So what makes this device cool, and now I'm going to move away from the homegrown course, and this is really not our capabilities, but The reason why we recommend some of these is because you can print the receipts. And as you know, by the way, one of the things that we're doing at Arifpay also is not just simply focusing on the technology, user adoption in our operations, but we're also really lobbying with the government. The reason why we say proudly that we were the first to get the licenses is because we were the ones, also one of the ones, we shouldn't take all the credit, but we pushed for those kinds of payment system operator license. And we will continue to push also for the awareness raising in terms of the e-receipts. As you know now in Ethiopia, you can not just have access to printed receipts, so the revenue authorities don't just recognize the printed authorities, but also e-receipts. But again, there's some awareness raising work that needs to be done. And this thing also can do a lot of stuff. It can scan your items. It is portable, as you can see. And now going back to the concept of, this is a commodity where it's not just, portable and highly connected, etc. It's also something that can be operated in a wireless fashion. And we take all of these things for granted, but believe me, even 10 years ago in the Valley, people were amazed with these things. So again, we're using Android because for us here in Ethiopia, it just doesn't make sense to go with the Apple. So for all of you who have Apple, sorry. But I'm pretty sure it's just maybe 1 or 2 people in this room. I think my wife is using Apple actually. So it's highly portable. Connectivity is there on 2G, 3G, 4G. But this is the most important. Again, remember, we have 2 parties in this transaction, the user, the merchant. The merchant at some point is going to want to see a very integrated type of capabilities, right? And the only way we can make this happen in Ethiopia, and elsewhere in other countries, is through a cloud-enabled software. And we will have APIs because we're going to talk in a second about the different partners that we want to partner with. We will have different APIs, and there's going to be all kinds of advanced algorithms, AI, machine learning type of algorithms that are going to take this data and make sure that the information that the merchant is using is enriched, as well as the user, right? So that tomorrow, as a user, when you start looking for maybe some kind of specific ice cream that you like, whatever, the app is going to tell you what to get in a radius of 5 kilometers or whatever our software engineer to set. So the cloud aspect is very important. The interoperability, of course, this is something that we're working very closely with our strategic partners at ET-Switch. We're also a shareholder of ET-Switch, and this gives us some very specific privileges in terms of integrations, etc. And this is why for us the fact that we're licensed is very important. Smart business operations is super important because at some point, again, the merchant is going to want to see all of these integrated capabilities into the palm of their hands. Today, as you know, we have a kind of a broken system in Ethiopia and in many other countries, where basically the data is kind of housed on-prem, and that's, by the way, when they have some amount of data, and the data never gets out, right? And the integration between the item management, between the cash register, and so on and so forth, is not integrated. So what we're going to do with Arifpay is also make sure that all of these capabilities are integrated. And so with this, you're going to be able to manage and monitor your sales report. This is really important because today, as you know, a lot of merchants, and we're going to talk about MSMEs in a second, are really having a hard time in terms of access to finance. And one of the reasons why they're having a hard time is because when they go to a bank, guess what? Number one, the bank says, hey, you're not profitable, I'm not going to invest in you. And number two, show me the money. Like, where are your reports? And usually these MSMEs don't have any kind of documentation. So for us, this is why also we don't want to just leapfrog to a WeChat Pay or to whatever, because we need to make sure that the merchant, the user, is instructed on some of these capabilities. How do you manage your sales reports? How do you then turn this data into perhaps also a collateral? So we're going to talk about also how on our product roadmap we're planning to manage all of this data. You can, as a merchant, also provide any kinds of coupons, of course, in a digital fashion. You can have loyalty programs, all kinds of things. And I don't want you to think of these kinds of capabilities reserved for a supermarket. Because for us, as you've seen also on the infographic earlier, we believe that, and this is true also in the US, MSMEs, I mean, in the US they don't use the term micro, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, are the backbone of the economy. Remember, even in the US, where we think that Apple and all those kinds of companies are leading the economy, but it's not true. The SMEs are the backbone even in the US. So Ethiopia, in the last 10 years, 98% of the companies who registered, 98%. Again, this is true data, we didn't make it up. We usually don't make anything up, by the way. Everything is evidence-based at Arifpay. 98% of the enterprises were MSMEs. And we're going to have the State Minister of the Labor and Skills this afternoon with us. And he's also going to talk about how some of these things are going to enable, the MSMEs. But the MSMEs tomorrow, right? When you go to Shamsu in your neighborhood, for those of you who don't know, Shamsu is kind of the term we use for, the merchant across in your neighborhood, and usually they have everything you need. They have everything you need from cigarettes, for those of you, to needle, for those of you who have babies. I grew up on needle. And so tomorrow, Shamsu is going to be able also to issue coupons. You know that today, by the way, Shamsu is giving a lot of credit to their users. It's just that we don't use these terms. But most of the time, Shamsu doesn't, accept the full payment. Oh, okay, tomorrow, you can pay for it tomorrow, no problem. But why can't we also instruct and make sure that Shamsu is enabled with these kinds of technologies? Why can't we also tell them, now tomorrow, or tell her, you can issue also coupons. You can manage your cash. If you want also to have an ukup, because usually the reason why Shamsu doesn't get into the digital world is because all of the cash that he gets during the day, he puts it in an ukup. And, for us, again, we're going to talk about partners in a second, but the idea is to have a wholesome type of ecosystem. And so we're currently exploring also partnerships with Ekup, the company now I'm talking about, which is led by two amazing entrepreneurs here in Ethiopia who are now making sure that Shamsu is going to get into a digital type of Ekup. So think of it, right? Tomorrow, Shamsu can manage his coupons and all of his cash flow through the post. Or maybe through a mobile device, because maybe this post is and by the way, these things are very cheap. Huh? I mean, relatively speaking, it's about 4,000 birr. Most of the banks used to bring some of this, point of sale systems that were pretty expensive and almost zero software. All of the, I can name the names of the manufacturers, Ingenico and all those. The software usually was, pardon my French, a bit of a junk, at a very steep price. About 30,000 birr, etc. Now this is almost 4,000 birr with a lot of more capabilities, and with the software is going to be quite amazing. But if Shamsu decides to just use his device and issue those coupons, now you're enabling Shamsu, right, with all of these capabilities. If you're now a slightly bigger enterprise than Shamsu, and you want to also manage all of your point of sale systems, Arifpay is also going to enable you to do that. With a terminal management system, you're going to basically have a whole understanding of your fleet and by the way, this is true also for hotels. I mean, you name it. We're going to talk about all the industries where we believe this is going to be applicable. So there's lots of features. I mean, we could go on and on about the features. I'm not much of a technical guy. We have our senior product manager with the whole team, so you can ask them a bunch of questions later. So the Arif Plus, I already talked about it. It can be jack enabled, it can be Bluetooth enabled. So there's a number of ways we can make this happen. It really depends on your requirements. We could have also this kind of device, where we have almost like a calculator looking thing. So it's really up to you. And we're going to have also a whole set of vendors for the hardware that's going to enable all of these different desires, right? So Arifpay, again, it's really serving in various industries. This is almost stating the obvious, but you know, the taxi hailing, food delivery, salons, cinemas. One of the things we hope to do next time. Today you pay 0 birr, right? When you purchased your ticket for Arifpay. Tomorrow maybe, or maybe in 6 months for Arifpay 2.0, we'll have some VIP seats at the front or maybe at the back, I don't know. And maybe a few, and then, but guess who's going to pay? Not the people at the back, the VIP people will pay for it at a very steep price, and at that point you'll be using the whole Arifpay gateway and all our capabilities to issue that payment. And so for Arifpay 2.0, we're hoping to have, and I hope you guys also appreciated the registration process as well as the checking in process that was all also enabled by our software engineers. So maybe also a big round of applause for those folks that, because some of these things we don't take it for granted. The idea for us, and I'm not hearing that round of applause, but it's okay. I think the software engineers are sitting in the back here, so at some point you can speak to them. Hospitality, in the health sector, pharmacies, family clinic, I mean, you name it, supermarkets, that's the obvious, groceries, I don't know who put that in someone who was drinking alcohol that night put that thing in the slide, but alcohol distributor, I mean, you name it, it's the post system nowadays in the US and many other countries serves many different industries. Oops, we have R that went down. As you know, for instance, Square, one of their value proposition was really to go after MSMEs. In Ethiopia, for us, we want to go after MSMEs, but we want to also enable all of the different industries. Thank you for that. So you know, the post-round, this is for me what makes me really excited. Because as much as we were focused on user adoption, what gets me excited is what's really coming ahead for our country. And remember, user adoption in these kinds of countries can go really fast. Really fast. Because we have a very youthful population. For me, when people tell me that we have a digital literacy problem, I usually pose the question back to the person who's saying that, or asking, are you the one who having digital literacy issues? Because last time I checked, the average age here in this country was less, I think the median was about 25 years old. More than 70% of the population is less than 30 years old. Usually for me, someone who's showing me how to use an app is a young person, and in some cases they have almost 0 degrees, right? So digital literacy is not the issue in this country. We have a whole set of other issues, and the idea is not to go through them today. So the idea will be on the post roadmap, right? To have the smart and mobile POS today, that's obvious. We want to make sure that we accept any local card payments, so the interoperability is very important. We need to make sure that there's a smart CRM again for the merchant, a smart business where all of these different type of capabilities are integrated. We need to make sure that the merchant is going to have a whole visibility on their business operations and not simply on that payment transaction. Tomorrow, we will use this data through our cloud-enabled digital payment infrastructure. We will use this data to issue credit or partner maybe with other financial institutions on merchant credit services. We will have also the QR and online payment. Again, some of these things we can do today, but in terms of user adoption, we want to wait. QR and online payments also will be really crucial, meaning that there's going to be a push and pull mechanism, right? Where I'm going to come with my device tomorrow, and using the app, and at that point we will have the app. The person can then purchase with the app through a static QR code. And for us, by the way, this is why also we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because QR code today is the standard. Who knows what the next standard is going to be? These are standards that are imposed on us, not by any country or whatsoever. It's just as a technology. It's like some of you remember back in the days where for VHS, I don't know if even some of you know the term VHS, but back in the days we didn't have DVDs nor Blu-rays nor whatever. There was a VHS system, and here in Ethiopia we were using PAL and SECA, and at some point the standard NTSC came, right? And then at some point they had a short, and then a long, and so on and so forth. So all of these standards And then Blu-ray came, and then whatever. Now I don't even know what people are using. I think everyone is using the cloud, right? Some of these things are becoming obsolete. So maybe the QR code also will become obsolete. But that's why in terms of user adoption, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. But at some point, there will be a mechanism where we can make that payment happen through a static type of mechanism, right? Push and pull mechanism. Inbuilt ERP suite with the Arif register, online merchant stores, online merchant bargaining. This is how we believe also e-commerce in Ethiopia can be enabled. There's a lot of talk about e-commerce in Africa, you know, with the likes of Jumia and so on and so forth, but you know where Jumia is these days, right? They're in Dubai. They've somewhat not been that successful in Africa. There's again a bunch of reasons for that. Number one, we don't really have the logistics nor the supply chain in some of these countries. But more importantly, the payment mechanism is still, I mean, you can check these numbers in terms of posts. Maybe, you know, Kenya is doing a bit better than us, and usually Kenya, a lot of people use it as a reference, but for me it's not usually a reference for many things either. But you can go to Uganda, etc. You'll see the same types of numbers in terms of posts, etc. So for us, e-commerce is also part of a maturity model. You cannot just wish today for e-commerce to happen. And that's why for us also, in terms of our payment gateway, which we're going to get into in a second, it doesn't make sense to start it today. Because look, by the way, we're a for-profit venture. We're not here to do any kind of charity. Right? So we need to make some money, and for me to go into e-commerce today, it just doesn't make sense. Where's going to be my bottom line, right? So we need to first enable the post, and we need to make sure that this lady here on the picture is not mad in the future, because today, you can see all of the different point of sale systems in the supermarkets, in many places actually, sometimes they're almost even under the table, right? And tomorrow we'll have one POS system where, remember, it's not the hardware, it's going to be the software that's cloud enabled and API enabled that's going to do this magic. Because the reason why we have this little sign going off the roof is because this person now, this merchant is connected to the cloud. And there's been also a very happy development here in Ethiopia in the last, I would say, 1 year, is now we have a whole set of data center providers. Some of them have gone live already, some of them are in the pipeline. But cloud now is something, is a reality in this country. It's not just wishful thinking. So for us also, the idea is to go along with the digital infrastructure that we have around us. One thing also that we need to think of, because this is something that some of the leaders are very, very keen about here in the banking sector about, is the fact there's a lot of forex going into all of these devices. As you know, here in Ethiopia, we have about 2 months worth of forex. I think maybe now, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks after those meetings with the international, with the IMF. We'll see. But the thing is, this is expensive. What you see here in front of me, this is expensive to have 5 ATM machines. And again, the West is not a reference. This is also true in many hotels in the West. But here in Ethiopia, and this is where I think we can use the term leapfrog, we can leapfrog this and use just 1 ATM machine. And this is the trend that ET Switch is already enabling with the interoperability. But we believe that with Arifpay's also digital payment infrastructure, we can help on that user adoption maturity model, and we can make sure that slowly, right, folks are going to be using maybe their ATM card there. And you know that in Ethiopia we use the term ATM card, it's a misnomer. It's supposed to be called debit card. ATM card is because people, again, in terms of user adoption, people are only using it for the ATM. So people started calling it ATM card, but tomorrow maybe we will use all kinds of mechanisms through the Arifpay digital payment infrastructure at that ATM. But the gateway roadmap is also something that I'm very excited about. The idea is for us to have a local payment aggregation very, very soon. Again, depending and based on the user adoption speed. We will have, or the merchant will have a portal. So now Shamsu, when slowly the gentleman now, or the lady is selling more and more needles or cigarette packs or whatever they're making money on, they're going to also have access to a portal, right? And a payment app. And same thing for the customer. They will be able to not only use these devices, but now slowly we're going to have them also use their laptop. They can go using our portal, the web application, and so on and so forth. There will be also an Arifpay payment ecosystem, and my colleague is going to talk about this in a second. For me, to be honest, at the heart of me, I'm not really a product person. I'm more of a operations person and strategy and operations. So I actually should have presented the next one because for us, the partnership aspect is going to be super important. There's no way Arifpay is going to go, even Ethio Telecom is not able to do it, to every single Shamsu across Ethiopia and tell them how to use their ecosystem, their capabilities, right? We have to create an ecosystem that's API enabled and fully integrated, where we have all kinds of different partners. And we're going to talk about, again, the different kinds of partners that we want to work with through all kinds of integration. That is through this integration that we will offer the merchant a whole set of payment ecosystem. The smart CRM we've talked about earlier, in terms of international payment aggregation, is also something that, again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but this is going to be super important because at some point, someone sitting in California or someone sitting, I don't know, wherever they are, will be able also to process payment for their loved ones here in Ethiopia. And the merchant will also be able to process, even if it's not their loved one, because remittance can also be sometimes looked at only within the family. And we will have and enable these international payments through all kinds of aggregation mechanisms. The merchant credit services, we talked about it earlier. The idea also is that tomorrow, slowly, just like WeChat Pay is doing it today, and by the way, you know why WeChat Pay was super successful? It's because and the rate of adoption was there super amazing. Is because they really were fully, and they are fully integrated with their social media handles. So today, a merchant in Hong Kong or in mainland China is able to basically also interact directly with their users. So and they're also able to process payments through social media. So for us, this is going to be super important. But again, not today, not today. We have to really take care of this user, the merchant, and make sure we bring them along the journey. The virtual and physical Arif card is also something that's at reach. But again, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because today, if we get into, and congratulations to Awash Bank on issuing credit cards, that is going to go very well in Ethiopia. But tomorrow also, here in Ethiopia, we have to be able to have virtual cards so that a tourist, whether they be inbound or outbound, is going to be able to pay wherever they go, right? Whether it be in Zanzibar, Mombasa, whatever, and then obviously here locally as well. So with that, I want to leave you with this thought again, that for us, our obsession is user adoption, not technology pushing, not technology adoption, it's user adoption. Technology is just a gadget. And with all of the talk around homegrown software, etc., software is also becoming a commodity. We here in Ethiopia, we need to really also make sure that we tap into the brains that we have. We have about 300,000 STEM students graduating each year. So we need to make sure we tap into these brains quickly before the software becomes also a commodity. Because the West now is also starting to bring these jobs back through robotics, process automation, and all kinds of different automation mechanisms. But here in Ethiopia, we have to also tap into this knowledge. We have to tap into these the soft horsepower that we have. And at the end of the day, again, it's not going to be about the technology we push on our users. It's going to be how fast they're adopted, whether they be the merchant or the consumer. We don't want to bully them. And we cannot go it alone. There's no way. This is just, it would be wishful thinking to be sitting here or standing here and saying, Arifpay is the best technology, and that's it. We're licensed, we're commercialized now, and we're going to basically go all across it. It's just wishful thinking, it's impossible. So we need partners. And we invited to this session also a whole set of different commercial partners. Because my colleague is going to also emphasize on this term in a second in terms of commercial partners. Here in Ethiopia we have, again, this tendency of working with development partners. It's not like we don't like them, but we need to work with commercial partners. Nowadays folks are reaching out to us saying, hey, maybe we can partner, what do you think? Let's kind of do it like this, like that, whatever. As if it's a taboo topic. So for us, we need to get away also from this mentality in Ethiopia of a dalala is a dalala, you know? And they're making the transaction happen, but they're just like, they didn't add value. So fine, when the person is not adding value, they're just, you can use a negative term and use all kinds of terms you want. But when they're adding value, let them get a piece of the pie, right? So for us, the idea is going to work with commercial partners, value-added resellers, system integrators, and so on and so forth. And I don't want to steal the thunder from my colleague. I thank you very much. I hope you guys are going to be part of this payment revolution. Remember, we need to reinvent the value chain until the end user. We need to make sure the end user is adopting technology. We shouldn't be pushing these things on them. We need to be integrating and rallying channel partners. So we hope you guys are going to join this revolution with us through channel partnership. And we need to always add value to the end user. Thank you.